Number 8 of the Rob Ellis Show here on A2D Radio. And man, it has been a lot of fun with all the guests we've spoken to. And when I thought of the concept of the show, Amy Fadool was definitely somebody I had in mind that I wanted to discuss. So basically, if you're just new to the show, what we do is we sort of walk through the life journey, the career journey, philosophies, what got you to the point of where you are? Because, let's face it, there's a lot of folks out there who are just trying to figure things out, whether it be a job in the media, whether it just be anything that you do. If you're an accountant, a salesperson, a landscaper, you try to figure out how to go from A to Z in a lot of ways. And it's not always linear. There's a lot of curves and forks in the road, right? So without further ado, let's bring on Amy Fadool from NBC Sports Philadelphia, who does an awesome job covering really any sport, any task that she has handed of late. Some Phillies, but certainly you know her from her Sixers coverage of the pre and post game show. Amy, good to see you. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be here, especially when you told me the subject of this. I know you and I have talked about this over the years. We've known each other now, 15 years close to it seems like now. So it's always fun to talk about kind of how you got here and as they like to say, how the sausage is made.
Yeah, I mean, look, later we'll get to, what's going to happen with the Sixers and Harden. Yeah. That's great. But I like to sort of walk through the career journey. So let's start with this, Aim. So you grew up in Virginia. Were you someone who always had this sort of as an end game? I know with a lot, it's funny, Aim, the people we talk to, some, I knew it I was 3 years old in preschool. Others, not really. I kind of stumbled into it in college or whatever. Where do you fall on that spectrum?
Yeah, not as early as preschool, but definitely elementary school. My mom was a teacher. I'm the youngest of 5, and my mom was a teacher. And I was the classic, probably underachiever for a good portion of my schooling early on. I just didn't see the point of a lot of things. Like, you're giving me this homework, I'm never going to use that in real life. My mom was like, you would argue till you're blue in the face, even when presented with evidence that to the contrary of whatever it was. That's also being the youngest of 5, and my personality a bit too. So I came home one day, I was 11 years old, and I said, I've got an assignment, and you had to decide what you wanted to do. Pick a career. And it couldn't just be like, I want to be a firefighter and you write one sentence. This was actually, it's 3rd grade. So you have to be like legit stuff. 3rd grade going into 4th grade. It was at the end of the school year. And so I was like, my mom's like, you should be a lawyer because you argue anything. I was like, all right, done. And so this is going to date me and you'll understand. I went to the encyclopedias. Yes. That's what you did when, it was.
Go to the bookshelf, dust it off. Here we go.
Pull out the L, which I think probably was with K because it was just together. And I looked up lawyer and it said, you go to college and then you go to 3 years of law school. And I closed that book right back up and put it right on the shelf and came back downstairs and said, 7 years after high school? There's no way. Like, me, Mom. There's no way I'm doing that. That's crazy. And she was like, well, they let people talk about sports. And I was like, yeah, I mean, obviously ESPN was in its early years, but Sports Center existed. And, back in the day it was Sports Center and then all the other random stuff they would have to have programming
fitness
on.
And
exactly, the strongman and whatever else. And so, but there was no women on. Robin Roberts and Leslie Visser really were the only women. And then later on, Michelle Tafoya, that were ever on my television talking about sports. And I was like, I don't know, Mom, like they don't let women do it. She's like, sure they will. You have no idea what they're going to be doing in, 15 years when you're going to be out there doing this. And so I was like, all right, I love sports. My mom loves sports. We were definitely the sport fans in our house. My dad and brothers loved sports too, but my mom and I consumed them in a way that really no one else in our household did. So I had to interview someone that does the career if possible. And she called up, she had a good friend that worked actually at the NBC affiliate in Richmond, Virginia, which is our hometown. And he was the news anchor and he got us in touch with the sports guy. And we went down there and interviewed him. And it was great. He actually retired maybe about 10 years ago, but he had been there for close to 40 years in Richmond, WWBT 12, Channel 12, the NBC affiliate. And I walked in his office and you know how it is. I mean, he's got TVs on his desk. He's got bobbleheads.
Tapes, old school beta tapes.
Stacked up.
Yep.
And I was like, well, I'm asking him, how you get there and whatever else. And he was like, I was like, what's a typical day? It's like, I come in at 3 and I leave, close to midnight. I'm like, you get to stay up and watch. I mean, 11-year-old Amy was just salivating.
And you don't have to get up early. Yeah.
This is amazing. You don't go to work until 3:00. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And you just watch sports all day. And he goes, yeah. And sometimes I go to the games. I'm like, I'm looking around. I'm like, how does not everybody be banging down the door to do this exact job? So I came back. I wrote my report up. Interviewed Ben Hamlin was his name. Interviewed my Ben Hamlin bit. And ever since then, the bug was really in me. So, you know, I was the sports editor of our student newspaper in high school. I did that section in the yearbook my senior year. And then I went to college knowing that I wanted to go to a school where, you know, sports was such a big part of it. And to me, growing up in Virginia, my brother and sister both went to UVA. So that pretty much crossed UVA off of my list. And so, yeah, I looked for a big Southern school. And that's, you know, my mom had gone to Kentucky, but I looked at them all. I looked at Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and Kentucky. And she kind of timed it out well because we went to see Kentucky on homecoming weekend. So,
yeah, mom knew what she was doing. Yes.
Yeah, this woman is no stranger to the hard sell or the easy sell, I guess, in my case.
Well, I want to go back to two things because two things I think you just touched on are key. Number one, sometimes when it's not, maybe when it's an off the beaten path, I would say that to an extent with our careers, a little bit different maybe than the traditional, let's be an accountant or, you know, whatever. Sometimes parents are discouraging. They're like, no, you need to get a 9 to 5, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. The fact that your mom was like, yeah, do it. Like, I don't care that we don't see a lot of women. Like, it's not going to be that way in 10 years, whatever. Like, number one, that's huge for a kid because then you're like, if I got mom's approval, man, I can go like all in. And the fact that sports director sat down with you, you know how it is, Amy, not you, but I mean, there are a lot of times where you'll get big timed when some kid, hey, can I have 5 minutes of your time? Oh, I'm busy, kid. Like those two things I think are huge.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly got big timed early on in my career when I was trying to learn the ropes, and I would go up and ask other people, you know, just their story, how they got there, how they got to where they wanted to be, what were their career aspirations, just trying to learn my own path, and kind of take a little bit and see where they kind of made their way. And sometimes they wouldn't reply back. And I'm currently either in the business or an intern, you know, I'm clearly on the trajectory. And, you know, you kind of have to take that with it's your early taste of rejection, I guess, which is great. Yep. But I also had some wonderful people along the way that were very helpful and were very supportive, whether they were at my television station or at others. But yeah, having your parents support you in something obviously is key because it's hard to go out there as a complete lone wolf. You need some kind of support system. And the good news is that it is such a great fraternity that we have and sorority, a group that we have of people that do this, that you really can find it. If your family isn't on board or they're a little bit, you know, unsure of how it's going to go, you really can find kind of that TV family, and especially the hours and the days and the nights and the holidays that we work, you really become family, it seems like. But yeah, like my mom, it was not even a question in her mind. Like if you wanted to do it, you would do it. And she was that way with all of us. And my dad always had the advice of, you know, do something you love, because you can do something you don't love and you'll hate every day that you wake up. And that I really took that to heart, obviously, because I do love this. I always laugh when I go to a Phillies game or a Sixers game or an Eagles game or a Flyers game or even a Union or whatever. People see me out, like, you're here. I'm like, I actually really enjoy sports. So that's why I do what I do. It's just a side note that I get to talk about it, because otherwise I'd be here anyway. And I think that's always like, it's great because Philadelphia people, they get it. They're giant fans too. And so I think that's really like one of the reasons that, you know, it's really fun to be here.
Yeah. Well, little secret that people may not know, not everybody in our business loves it. They're not always passionate about it. For some folks, it's a job. And the second that red light goes off, they're out. Yes. Yeah. So, but you know, you truly do, sincerely. So you said the Southern school, you end up in Kentucky. I mean, and you talk about a school that was just going to enhance your love of sports, right? I mean, you're there, and correct me if I'm wrong, Amy, you were there when they won at least one of their national titles in basketball. 2 of them. Oh, wow. Yeah, all right. So walk me through that and what you did at Kentucky, because at least the good thing is you knew going in what you wanted to do. So what was the approach at Kentucky for you to get that experience?
Yeah, so obviously when I applied to the broadcast journalism program. It's not really a school. I think it probably is a school now, because you know, everything's still, this was in the mid to late 90s. So everything was still kind of new on that front. Sports journalism hadn't really taken hold the way it has now. Of course, now it's completely evolved, but that really, the boon of it was, I think, in the 2000s. But this was, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, in the mid to late 90s. So my first year there, they went to the national championship. My second year there, they went to the national championship, lost in overtime to Arizona. My second year, they won it. My first year as well. So, but I applied, and I was, started in the broadcast journalism program right away. You obviously, when you go to a large school, as anybody that goes to Temple or Penn State knows, you have to take all your other classes too, the English and the chemistry and all that nonsense that you will literally never use ever again. I'm walking in the Bio 101. I'm like, I'm never going to be in here again.
Let's get through it. Yeah.
Let's get this requirement out of the way. I'm all done with this department. So, but once I kind of got in the program, it was interesting because there weren't that many women in there, but there were some. Of the probably 200 or so that were broadcast journalism majors with the sports concentration, because you had to pick the concentration if you're going to be news or whatever. Sports concentration. There was probably 200 total, and maybe there was like less than 10%, maybe like 15 to 20 women. But that was saying something back in the day.
It's a little bit more growth. Yeah.
I mean, this is like 25 years ago. So that dates me right there about how
you're 21. Nobody do math.
I just had a birthday. I'm 32.
We don't do math.
Sure. So, but yeah, and it was a really wonderful experience because writing for the paper there, interning at the television stations there, you're covering your alma mater, which is wonderful, but also you're obviously covering a very large area. Lexington covers, their television market is not as small as people think, just because it covers an entire, basically, section of the entire state, central and eastern Kentucky. So its market probably 60 something now.
And Cincinnati as well. Do they do Cincinnati? They go that
far? They
do.
Do go to Cincinnati. So I got to cover the Bengals when they would come down for training camp, because they were in Georgetown, Kentucky, which is about 30 minutes. Cincinnati and Lexington are only about an hour away from each other. So Georgetown was about half hour in between. So just that exposure to, really, it seems like it's low level because it's college basketball and college football, but they treat college basketball as if it's an NBA team, maybe even bigger, because it's really the only game in town. And then you have the horse racing as well, which is a completely different animal. Sorry for the pun, but it really is. And you're talking about covering these sales where these yearling horses are going for, $15 million, sight unseen, unproven. A sheik's coming over from Abu Dhabi with his 747 parked at the end of the Lexington airport, which has 4 total gates, and talking to these gentlemen and their handlers more often, especially as a woman, you didn't get to talk to them necessarily, but it was just really a great experience because that's where I went to college. So covering it, doing your stories when, for your college assignments, you would go to a college basketball game and it would be Kentucky, Indiana, or Kentucky, Florida. I mean, these were major things that were being covered by all the national networks, and you were there as a student reporter and talking to the coach. In my case, it was Rick Pitino and then Tubby Smith, which were 2 very diametrically opposite experiences, as you can imagine. But it was just really, it was such a great way. And as you mentioned, it did nothing to dissuade me in any way, shape, or form from doing this, because I thought, well, this is how it always is. I mean, you get to cover teams that win national
every year.
championships. Yeah. My mom's calling me, who went to Kentucky. She's like, this is not normal. You don't go to 3 straight national championships. Like, you don't? It just seems like this is just what we do here. So obviously they had the drought after 98. It was a bit of a spell there for over a dozen years. But it was really such an eye-opening experience because it was everything I thought it was going to be. And sometimes things don't live up to that. Right. And it really did.
Well, so let's go to graduation, because you got great experience, it sounds like, at school, but then you got to find a real job. Like, that's a hard thing. Your first one out of the business. And, oftentimes you end up in Idaho or wherever. You got to do what you got to do. Were you fortunate enough to stay in the Kentucky market? Is that how it worked?
I was. So I interned before my last year at Kentucky. I interned at the CBS affiliate, WKYT. And as you know, interns, free labor. They don't pay interns. Some places do, but we did not get paid. But you work for free. And I was working close to intern-wise. I interned there for probably, I think it was 2.5 months. It was basically July in August. Maybe it was 2 months exactly. So it was basically July and August. And then they were looking for someone part-time. Do you want to work part-time? $7.50 an hour. Absolutely. I'll clear my schedule. I'll figure out my classes so I can be at your beck and call, because you had to be available for Friday night football, Saturdays for football games if called upon, which obviously put a wrench in my social calendar for the senior year, but it was totally worth it. But so I worked just under 40 hours a week, because then if you hit the 40 threshold, they have to pay you benefits.
Oh yeah.
Do that because I was a part-timer. So I was, thrown right in there. I was doing stories my last year of college. I had my first time anchoring. I was still in college because no one wanted to work on New Year's Eve. The Kentucky football team was in Florida for a bowl game, so half the staff was gone. They just needed someone there as a backup and to toss to the people. And I said, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out I did, was not good, but I made it through. And apparently I didn't suck bad enough for them not to hire me. But honestly, I like to say that I was in the right place at the right time, but honestly, I was the right price at the right time too.
Yeah, but Amy, do you put yourself in the position? That's
True.
The thing I always tell, I was trying to tell interns, the great thing about internships is you either figure out, I love this, or this is not for me. And that's okay too. It's good to find out while you're interning before you commit to it, as a career. But the other part is, and you're being modest, obviously, but you got to put yourself in a position to be like, yeah, I'm good. I'm available. You need me on a Friday night, where some college kids would have been like, I want to go party. Forget it. So the fact that you were available, availability is a big deal. You were available, and that can be a game changer in a person's life.
Yeah, I always tell when I talk to, whether it's students currently in college or interns, I say the same thing. Like, your best answer is always yes. Do you know how to shoot? Yes. Can you do this on Friday? Yes. And you figure out everything else later. Yep. Obviously, not to the detriment of your mental health or anything like that, because I don't want people to overextend themselves. But me, I just, my dad always said, if you're not working towards your goal, you're working against it. Like, if you're not doing something proactive, even if you're doing nothing, that means you're working against your goal.
Amen.
So if you're doing something for it proactively, you're going to help yourself. And so that's what.
Aim, you still there? Did we lose Aim? I think we got you back, Aim. Yeah, you were just saying your dad says if you're not working towards your goal, you're working
towards it. Yeah, you're working against it. So I always tried to be proactive in that regard. So eventually, right before, it was a month before graduation, they kind of looked around the newsroom and were like, that one, she works, we'll take her. So they hired me full time. They started doing a news share with the Fox affiliate there at the time. And so the news share works, it's kind of like how CBS does with the CW here and things like that. Like 6 ABC will do other people's news. That was Fox was still coming kind of on with the 10 o'clock news. So they needed someone to anchor their sports. And I was an employee of CBS, but I did the news share for Fox a couple times a week. And then I was available. And so I worked there until I left for Nashville about a year, and it was almost 2 years later. But yeah, I was at the right place, the right time for the right price.
How, so that as I'm sure your goal wasn't ultimately to stay in Kentucky. So how forward thinking were you even from like Jump Street? I mean, you're obviously very happy you got a full-time gig, but were you always was there a destination? Was there a market that was always in your mind? Or were you kind of the mindset like, hey, let me just see what opportunities come about here, and then I'll make the moves? What was your mindset even at a young age then?
East Coast. East Coast was always because while covering sports in the South is everything that you think it's going to be, because it's covered like it's professional.
It's religion. Yeah,
it is. I mean, it's what they do. Friday Night Football is a thing. We have a 40-minute show, and it's super highly rated. And that's true for anybody in the South, not just Kentucky. Alabama, obviously, is going to be big. Georgia, Tennessee, all of them. But I always kind of wanted to get back to the East Coast. I'm originally from Virginia. Most of my family was living in the D.C. area. But to me, that's the sports I grew up on. I grew up on professional sports in addition to college as well. So I wanted to cover, and I thought at the time I wanted to be on national. That's because that was what the marquee was. I learned later as you go through this, that's not everything. At least it wasn't for me that I thought it was going to be. It wasn't necessarily what I wanted. I like the closeness of a local television station and market, but I like the exposure of something national. So I really thought at first I wanted to be sidelines, because I thought that would give me the kind of the marriage of two worlds. It turned out I didn't know about regional sports television, and that was exactly what it was going to be. But yeah, I knew from an early start to my career that while Lexington, I loved it, that was just going to be a step. I wanted to get a little bit more experience. I wanted to have pro sports back in my life, because I watched NFL every Sunday, like most people did. I remember even being in college in the sorority house, and I would go downstairs on Sunday, and I would be watching. I would be the only one, as people sometimes were coming in from the night before, and I'd be sitting down there in the TV room watching NFL football and watching the pregame show. That was always kind of my goal, is I wanted to be in a major sports town. So Lexington, though it was a major sports town in its own right, it wasn't a major sports town for me. And so I knew from an early jump in my career that I was going to keep going.
All right, so I want to. Well, no, you did, obviously. So I want to take a quickie. I want to get to where we go next on the journey. Eventually brings you to Philadelphia, and then I want to, get into the craziness that is Philadelphia sports, and we'll talk about what's happening, present day here with the Sixers, with the Phillies, who you have covered in a great way. So we'll do all of that. If Amy can hold on for 1 second, we'll take a quickie here. We'll come right back with Amy Fadool right here on the Rob Ellis Show, A2D Radio. Right back.
Hey Birds fans, the NFL schedule has arrived and Philly Sports Trips has all the details now. Visit the site phillysportstrips.com. This is sure to be an epic season. Be sure to go there now to make sure that you don't get shut out. Join us in Tampa, LA, Seattle, or when we get revenge in Kansas City. Don't want to fly? No problem. Gather up your crew and hop aboard one of our signature boisterous bus trips to DC or New York. Sign up now and make sure to mention A2D. Don't miss out on the best Philly fan experience anywhere. Philly Sports Trip customers always stay at the best hotels and meet NFL legends. Book today.
Right. We are back. Thrilled to have our guest today, and it's Amy Fadool from NBC Sports Philadelphia, and we're walking through, the life and career journey of Amy. You get a lot of love on the chat section too, Amy, for FYI. I don't want to distract you from what's happening, but it's a lot of positivity here, which is nice. So, all right. So we're in Lexington, but it's kind of time now. It's time to make that next move. Where do we go now?
I'm still in my safe zone. So I go to Nashville, all of about 2.5 hours away.
Okay.
But it's obviously you're venturing into pro sports with the Titans. And that was my first exposure to hockey. Growing in Virginia, we didn't really, the Capitals weren't a thing. The Capitals still really aren't a thing, for everybody wondering out there. That's a terrible sports town, Washington. Capitals win the cup, and then all of a sudden their fan base just forgets that they play hockey. So I had never covered hockey. So it was really great because it was like dipping my toes into a larger market. Your market like 32, I think, at that point. So it was a larger market, more exposure to professional sports, and it was the same role. I'm still a weekend sports anchor, a weekday sports reporter, but it was a lot of a different feel. I was working full-time for a Fox station, so we had an hour-long 10 o'clock news. We had a very healthy sports section. I mean, we had 8 minutes, which is unheard of.
Wow.
Now when you watch which was great. And so I started working for, it was Fox 56 it was, and I remember the first time I walked into the Titans press box, wow, I'm here. This is great. And this is exactly what I was looking for. So I was really excited for that. And then from there, I went to Baltimore, which is only a professional sports town. They do cover Maryland quite a bit because that's, obviously not that far down the road, but high school sports aren't as big. It's really that, to me, that was the goal. It's like, all right, I'm back on the East Coast. I'm in a market that's very good. It wasn't necessarily a big market jump because I think that's market like 25 or so. But for me, it was a different feel. East Coast sports are a different feel from the South. So it was
plus, you're not far from home, which has got to be
exactly
cool. Parents could watch
honestly,
the whole nine. Yeah,
that was kind of like, if I never moved from Baltimore, I was okay with that. I had an agent at the time, and I loved Baltimore. I lived 2 blocks from Camden Yards, and on my off days, I would go over to Camden Yards. I could go to Ravens games when I wasn't working, which is very rare on a Sunday, obviously, in that town. So that was my first exposure of that. Nashville and Baltimore, working that what's called the traditional, obviously, sports schedule, which is Sunday through Thursday.
Right.
And so I would actually have my off days on Monday, Tuesday, because I had to work on Sundays, and then I had to work Friday, Saturday. Monday, Tuesday off days, are just
the only good thing is you can get to the bank, you can get your laundry.
Yes,
you're not fighting crowds at the supermarket. That's the only positive.
It's great. Monday Night Football, you're ready to tie one on. Everybody else is like, we got to go home. It's halftime. I'm like, wait, I'm not working tomorrow.
Exactly.
Let's go. Let's get some shots going. What's wrong with Fadool? She's drinking at 10:30 on a Monday.
This woman has a problem.
Exactly. Yes. Something's wrong with her. This is my Saturday, you guys. Let's go. So That was my first exposure to that. I was like, oh, I get it. Okay, so now I need to.
You're trying to coax like friends. You're like, listen, come on, and they're like, dude, no. And anyway.
Meanwhile, everybody else in the business is like, yes, let's go. I'm like, thank you. These are my people. This is who I'm gonna hang out with. But then from there, I had an agent at the time, and he, it comes up. You know how this business is. You get a contract. It's basically every 2 years.
Yep.
So my 2 years was coming up. Actually, I'd interviewed before my 2 years was up with ESPN, with an outfit up there to do sidelines. And I went up to the mothership, and I just thought, at that point, I kind of knew that I really liked anchoring, and I liked being a part of a community. It was so interesting from 5 years previous, which isn't that long before, but my stops in Lexington and Nashville at that point, I was close to 5 years in the business. I had learned that I liked exactly what I was doing, and I wanted to continue doing that. I went and interviewed just to see it because, it was amazing. And maybe if it had been an anchor job, I would have thought differently. But it was exactly what I thought I wanted 5 years previous. And it turns out it wasn't anything what I wanted at all. Selfishly, I wanted more Amy time on the television. I wanted to talk more. And I wanted to be a part of a community.
Yeah, but Aim, that's something, know thyself. Like most people would have just jumped. It's ESPN. It's like the blinding lights of it. Would have just jumped had they had the opportunity. You would have ultimately probably been not miserable, but it wouldn't have been as satisfying. And the fact that you knew that there's something to be said for that, because a lot of you were still really young, would have just jumped at it for sure.
Yeah. And I was fortunate that I did realize that, okay, well, this is great. And it is very shiny and bright and new and awesome. And everybody I see doing it is so good. And then you're questioning, can I even do it like as good as they are? Because I watch them all and I'm thinking, this is the peak of Aaron Andrews and Chris. I mean, these people are so good at their jobs. And I just thought, I don't know, like it didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel right to me. And it was nothing that they did or the company or anybody I interviewed with. It just, for me, I was like, I knew who I was. As you mentioned, know thyself. I knew that I wanted to be. I loved being in the towns. I loved being in Lexington. I loved being in Nashville. I loved being in Baltimore. I loved being a part when you roll up and you have the number or your call letters on the back of your jacket, people calling out, hey, Fox is here. Hey, CBS is here. That's right. We're here. That kind of stuff. I loved that. And not that you wouldn't have gotten it at ESPN, you've gotten it on a major level, but to me, it didn't feel home, I guess is probably the best way. So my agent had set that up and we went up and I was just like, I don't think so. He's like, well, what do you want? I was like, I don't know. I kind of want both. I want something where there's maybe, a little bit more where it's just sports, because working in local television, as you know, if it snows, sports is the first to get axed.
Goodbye.
If there's breaking news, all right,
Goodbye.
I'm going to take your 5 minutes or 3 minutes or 2 minutes or whatever you had. And so you feel slighted after a while. You're a sports person. And what am I doing here if I'm just so, you can just shoot me out.
I'm irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. Well, here's the problem, Amy. So news directors who don't necessarily, especially the ones who don't know sports, and most of them don't or care about sports, they're going to value, hey, it's raining. We need 15 weather hits or, whatever. Traffic's bad. Let's go back out to so-and-so and see what's happening. So they look at it and they're like, who the Orioles won? Who cares?
No one cares.
They don't care. And you're right. Like the fact that earlier you were doing like 8 minutes is crazy, because most of the time you're happy if you get 2.5 minutes or 3 minutes in a local sportscast. So yeah, I could see where we're going here, because you want sports to be the priority, but you also want the local feel, and that there's nothing better than a regional sports network for that. Yeah. Right.
And my foray into it is obviously I was working in Baltimore, and Comcast Sportsnet DC had a branch in Baltimore. So I knew who they were. Nesson, obviously everybody knew who Nesson was. They broadcast all of the Red Sox and the Bruins games. And then you knew who the Yes Network. And those were that's all I kind of knew. I didn't know anything about it. So he's like, well, there's one in Philadelphia and there's an opening. Lance had just left, and that opening was right there. And I went up and interviewed. I interviewed during the World Series in October of 2008. And if you want to talk about like my mom set me up for success when she took me to Kentucky, and it was homecoming weekend, and it's stunning and crystal blue skies and the energy and the campus is massive. Talk about walking in sight unseen to a city you've never been in, and it's the middle of the World Series, their first in a really long time. Ooh. And the entire city was on fire. And I mean that in the best way possible. The energy was palpable. And I thought, I interviewed down at the Comcast Tower first, the first one, and then down at Sportsnet with Michelle Murray after that. And I just remember thinking, like, you guys, like, whatever it takes, I hope I don't blow this. I hope I don't blow. Rob Kessler helped me with my setting up my rundown.
NBC 10 Philadelphia. Yes.
He's out, NBC 10 Philadelphia does all of their sports over there for their producing. And I'll never forget, one of the things I talked about was, this shows how old this is, was about Elton Brand getting the Philly Max. And Jessica Simpson was dating Tony Romo. And so everybody was going to, like, have her be out because he lost when she was ever there. I can't remember what it was. It was something like that. And I was thinking, that dates me, obviously, and how long I've been here, because this was 2008. And obviously the Phillies in the World Series. It was awesome. And apparently I did not blow the audition. And so they called me. It took a while. This media industry, it's not like accounting where I'm going to go apply at Ernst & Young. You either got the job or you didn't, in 24 to 48 hours. I mean, you're talking about like a month later.
The hardest part, as Tom Petty once said. Yeah.
Oh, the waiting. It's just so, and I'm just like, I'm sitting there and my contract's up at the end of the year, basically December 30th in Baltimore. And now it's like, we're pushing Thanksgiving and I'm like, okay.
Yep.
Maybe am I gonna
and they're asking you, they probably want you to re-up and you're fighting that off. Yeah. It's a whole game that you have to play sometimes. And it's like, meanwhile, you're trying to just do your best you get at your job, but there's a million things going on in your head. Yeah. Yeah.
So I get the job. I get the call right after Thanksgiving. It's the end of November. And I'll never forget. I hadn't told my television station yet, but I go up here. It's the first weekend in December. I'm in Philadelphia covering the Army Navy game for my television station in Baltimore. And I remember, like, I think that I had to go on with the Fox affiliate here just to talk. And I also did a Ravens game that was up here. The Ravens game where you guys substituted Donovan McNabb for Kevin Cobb.
That was a big deal.
Ed Reed. There was a gasp on our side of the Ravens side, the Baltimore side. They're like, what are they doing? Ed Reed returns it. 102 yards or whatever it was. So that was all after I had taken this job. And I remember I had to go on with the Fox affiliate as the Ravens kind of person. You sometimes do that here in Philadelphia. And I had to call Michelle. I'm like, is this okay? And she's like, yeah. You're still working there. But it was awesome. I got to come up here twice after I knew that I was going to work here at the time to cover teams, obviously, for Baltimore. But yeah, I mean, it instantly felt like everybody was so welcoming. As soon as I, first got here and started telling people that I was going to be working here, it was so much fun. I loved it. And it was the right decision for me, but it was a perfect decision because it was the best of both worlds in my mind.
Yeah. Well, so to me, you're a classic case of, you may not have been born here, but you are absolutely a Philadelphian. I'm serious. Like I feel
it. I hope so.
No, you are sincerely. And some people, you could tell it's just not cut out for them. And they're kind of like, this place is nuts, because Philadelphia is different. It is. But look, I'll say it. It's right. You love the passion, but the passion for some people, they can't handle it. You handle it very well. How quickly did you know, like, this is a fit for me? Like, how soon?
Probably from the jump. I mean, my first story, you'll love this. So I started January 5th, 2009. My very first story was covering, I did a couple stories. My first story. I think I anchored a few times. My first story out in the field, I went up to, it was a tailgate group, the Scotty Express, shout out Scotty Express, going up to the Meadowlands for the wild card game against the Giants. And we met in the Northeast at some pull off where there's an Exxon and there's a Dunkin' as well. And these folks at 5:30 in the morning are doing shots of Jaeger followed by coffee. And we took the Scotty Express, this little teeny bus, which probably goes maybe max 60 miles an hour, from the Northeast all the way up to the Meadowlands. Riding the bus, that was the story. Dave Didinger was my shooter. And I was like, I mean, if this doesn't tell you, either you're in or you're out right away, this is it. And I was so far in. I mean, I had to be on camera, but I was that close to joining them on some of this because they drank the whole way up. There's a bar inside the bus, of course. And the best part is there's probably 30 people or so on this bus. I think 2 had tickets, maybe.
Well,
They
it's,
just were going up
basically,
to go.
we'll figure it out, or we'll just
Yeah.
stay out here and
Or
tailgate
we'll
in the
just
parking
stay
lot.
here and tailgate in the parking lot.
Yep.
It was awesome.
Mhm.
And I never forget Josh Schrager, who now is on the Sixers broadcast. He was driving one of our vehicles behind us because Dave and I obviously had to get back. We couldn't stay and party with them for the game, unfortunately.
What a bummer. Yeah.
But that was one of my first stories out there. One of the second things I did out in the field was I was over at Chickies and Pete's for the NFC title game. And that was the one where, everybody's like booing McNabb, and I looked at somebody, I was like, why are you booing him? He hasn't thrown 3 touchdowns to Larry Fitzgerald. Maybe someone could cover Larry Fitz for a second. They're like, yeah, but I was like, nah, see, I like it. They gave me the yeah, but, which means they know what I'm talking about, but they're not going to accept it. And those are my kind of people.
That's right.
That's how I watch sports.
That's right.
Exactly. Yeah, but you don't understand.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's good.
That's in my first 3 weeks here. I was like, done, sold.
So let's fast forward too, not to get too sappy, but you end up meeting the love of your life here too. Yes, so it all kind of, not only career-wise, but it all worked out. Sean Kane, who is a longtime producer at NBC Sports Philadelphia, does a great job with the Phillies. Whatever he does, he's great at. But you guys end up meeting as well. I mean, this was kismet here.
It really was. We had a group that would go out on Sundays, usually after all the shows, especially after Eagles. And we would go out to Bishop's Collar and Fairmount, and this whole group kind of like welcomed me into their little, their group. And so Sean and I got to know each other that way. And, it's, when you work these hours, as you know, Rob, like you become really close with a lot of these people.
You really do. It's a different kind of bonding thing than if you work a 9 to 5. Not to say people don't go out for a happy hour 9 to 5,
right?
But because your hours are so different from almost everybody else, you spend a lot of time with the people you work with, and you have very common interests because everybody there loves sports. Like you may work in another field where it's like, yeah, we're all good at accounting, but I'm going to do my gardening or whatever. We all have a common interest.
Yeah. And I think that's it. So, you become friends first, and obviously it evolved from there. And now we've been married. It'll be 11 years coming up. We have 2 kids. We live here we used to live in South Philly. Now we live out in the suburbs. And it's just, I can't imagine the highest compliment you mentioned, like being, a Philadelphian. The highest compliment I get is when people ask me where I went to high school.
Or what parish are you from?
Yeah. And I'm like, I really and I know him so well now that I could probably just BS my way through it. Yeah. And I was like, I would never try to just commandeer that. But I love that. I'm like, I'm sorry to say I went to high school in Virginia. Like, no, I thought you were from, and they'll just name something. And I'm like, I wish I was from there. I'm not. I am sorry. I'm not from Pottstown. But I wish I was. It's right up the road.
All right. So here's what we're going to do. I got to sneak one more in, but I want to talk some present day with you, Amy. There's a lot. They may not win. They may not win championships, but there's always drama with the Sixers. There's always a lot going on with the Sixers. I want to dive into that. I know you've been pretty heavily into the Phillies of late too. So I want to talk about that as well. We'll mix it a little Eagles. So we will do some, beyond just the sort of the life journey. I want to get your take because you're up on everything. Here's another little secret, kids. Not everybody can talk about every sport who's in the business. Amy can. So she is a difference maker as far as that goes. All right. So here's what we'll do. Ralph, we're going to sneak in a quickie here. Let's get a quickie in. We'll come back. We'll talk to Amy about everything that's happening in Philadelphia sports. We'll start with the Sixers and James Harden in particular. We'll do that when we come back. This is the Rob Ellis Show on the A2D radio channels. Right back.
Hey, Birds fans, the NFL schedule has arrived and Philly Sports Trips has all the details now. Visit the site phillysportstrips.com. This is sure to be an epic season. Be sure to go there now to make sure that you don't get shut out. Join us in Tampa, LA, Seattle, or when we get revenge in Kansas City. Don't want to fly? No problem. Gather up your crew and hop aboard one of our signature boisterous bus trips to DC or New York. Sign up now and make sure to mention A2D. Don't miss out on the best Philly fan experience anywhere. Philly Sports Trip customers always stay at the best hotels and meet NFL legends. Book today.
All right, we're back. Rob Ellis Show, A2D Radio. Amy Fadool from NBC Sports Philadelphia joining us. Does a ton of pre and post for the Sixers as well as other sports. Amy, let's start with the Sixers. I don't know, man. The Harden thing here, I'm not sure what to make of this at this point. I thought he was going to opt out. He didn't opt out. He's unhappy. He wants out. Everybody's hugging at the white party, with Michael Rubin. I don't know what to make of this at this point. Are you as lost as I am here?
Yeah. I mean, everyone thought he was going to opt out. I think the Sixers thought he was going to opt out. Obviously, they've had some talks about it, and I think the agreement was let's just not opt out. Maybe see if you can get something for James Harden. Also, I think that the market out there, James Harden realized, and maybe his camp did, it's not what he thought it was. I mean, he's not going to get a 4-year deal. I don't think that that's coming down the pike. I don't know any teams that are building are going to look to pay him what he would have to earn on a 4-year deal. And I don't think any teams that are championship are going to want to tie up a guy for 4 years of the age of James Harden. So, the Rockets were the team mentioned. I think that they probably did have interest, but they had their eyes on Fred VanVleet for a while. As soon as he opted out, he's 29 years old. He's a guy that you could give a 4 or 5 year contract to. Harden, 33, not as popular to give him a 4-year deal to or a 3-year deal. And for the money, it wasn't just really going to work out for them. That's a team that does feel like they've got some nice pieces and want to build up. And I think if he would have come there in 2 years on like a 1-year deal to try to be like a final piece of a team that's, vying for a conference title, they probably would have done it. But I don't think that they're there right now. And I think that kind of came to pass. So then you're talking about, all right, well, I'm going to opt in so I can trade. Who are your trade partners? I mean, there's only a couple teams that were ever interested in James Harden's services, even when he was up for the option when he wanted to get out of the Nets. So you're looking at some of the same teams. I know the Clippers have been mentioned. The Heat were in there for a little bit until Dame's name came out there. So in the Knicks, which I think is very odd, because why would you take the ball out of Jalen Brunson's hands? Jalen Brunson almost single-handedly made that team back into a winner. So confusing on that point, but they just figured out they just got everybody from Villanova. That team right there, 2016 National Championship team. Mikal Bridges has to be like,
I know.
I'm in Brooklyn.
I'm not that far, guys. I can Uber right over to the Garden. It's not far.
See you guys in a minute.
Yeah.
And Ryan Arcidiacono was like, I was just there. I'll come back.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to me. But yeah, the James Harden thing is a real puzzle. I think there's actually a better chance than not that he's back with the Sixers. And then they try to move him during the season. One thing we know about Daryl Morey is he's not going to rush anything.
No.
I appreciate that in one aspect, that he didn't rush the Ben Simmons thing, was able to get, obviously, James Harden for him. And that turned out to be much better than having a sulky guy who never shot the ball and refused to play. Whatever you want to say about James Harden, he played basketball and he did it pretty well for 2 years or a year and a half for the Sixers. I mean, he won you single-handedly 2 playoff games this past year. So that trade was good. Now I don't know what their viable options are. When you look at the Clippers, and I hear people saying Paul George, that's only if the Clippers really want to move off Paul George's deal, which I don't know that
he's
they
hurt
do.
all the time too.
So it's
all the time. Yeah.
Do you really? He's a nice player. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a very underrated player when he's healthy. But this guy's missed whole chunks of seasons. I mean, people complain about they complain about Joel Embiid getting nicked up. I mean, Paul George is missing halves of seasons, 3/4 of seasons, whole seasons. It doesn't mean that he can't come back, but he's not at the age anymore where that's a viable thing for him to be sitting there playing 80 games, 75 games. And so if you're going to invest that kind of money, you really need to make sure you get back a viable piece. The window, we all know, is not very large for a championship here in Philadelphia with Joel Embiid. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. That is how it is. The pieces that they currently have, I don't think are enough. I know they got close. Everybody's going to go with the 7 games of the Celtics. I don't think that they're as close as the 7 games of the Celtics. Their chance really got slimmer as that series wore on. It was, you could see that. The writing was on the wall basically after game 4. You're thinking, okay, that was it. They had a sliver of a hope. They dashed it. It was such night and day. And it's a bad matchup. It's always been a bad matchup for them with the Celtics. If they face the Bucks in the second round, I have no doubt in my mind it's a better matchup. They would have been able to get past the Bucks. They see Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and just they stop. They can't do anything.
Yeah.
Al Horford turns into Superman, for Pete's sake. Speaking of kryptonite, Jason Tatum doesn't do anything until the fourth quarter, and then all of a sudden he turns.
Yeah.
So it's puzzling to me. But the James Harden thing is a real conundrum right now. And I know it's going to be a very awkward meeting when they have to meet with him because they need to, it's at an impasse and something's going to have to give. Right now, it's not a waiting game. It's like a staring contest. Who's going to blink first?
I also don't understand, like, Harris may not go, Harden may be back. Like, I don't know how you sell that. And I know you don't necessarily make these decisions for this reason, Amy. I don't know how you sell it to the fans. like a team looking as similar as it could look, that, yeah, this will be different. Why?
With a worse bench.
Right. Losing Niang and some of the other parts. Yeah. Like, how is it going to be better? How are you going to advance? Are you just going to say, hey, well, Nick Nurse is here? Like, and I wasn't a huge Doc Rivers fan, but to lay it all on Doc Rivers, like, give me a break.
Yeah. I think I'll be interested to see if James Harden is here, how he and Nick Nurse get along. Nick Nurse is known as a very hard coach.
Yeah.
He's hard on his players. He demands a lot. And I think rub some people the wrong way. If you win, no one cares. It's like Bill Belichick up there in New England.
Yep.
No one cares if you're a salty person, if you're bringing all the Super Bowls home. People do start to care if you lose. So obviously Nick Nurse went 41-41. A couple years after he won it all, he's out because maybe he sours people. I'm not really sure. I don't know him at all. I know that he's a very good in-game coach. We obviously saw what he was able to do with the Raptors and turn that team around and get them to the promised land. He can account for some, but he can't account for all. I don't know how you can trot the same team out with a worse bench right now as it's currently constructed and think Nick Nurse is just going to get you. All of a sudden you're going to win the championship. I think that's a hard sell. And people, listen, I saw it. You saw it also on social media, and you interact with the fans as well. That was it. That was their time. You had the MVP. You have James Harden putting up 40 points. That was their chance. And to lose like that in such a bummer of an effort in that game 7, you're thinking, what was it all for? What was it all for? It was very deflating, and it's going to be hard pressed to trot the same team out there and expect fans to see, oh yeah, this is we're going to get a different result with the exact same thing that we had last. Wait a minute. So I'll be interested.
Well, I'm with you. Like, if you had gone down swinging game 7 and Harden and B put 30 up and you just, Tatum goes bananas and you lose. Yeah. Okay. You're not happy, but at least it's like, man, they fought the rear ends off. That was embarrassing and disgraceful the way that when we all saw it, and there's no way to pretty that up. I'm sorry. And you can spin it any way you want. Let me ask you this, Amy. Agree to disagree. If Harden is not here, they're a better team.
Agreed.
Yeah. I think so too.
And I don't mean that as a slight on James Harden. He is better than what I thought he was. I always thought he was a chucker. This guy just puts up whatever ridiculous points. And he is an excellent passer. I mean, the fact that he has taken that part of his game and evolved it to the extent that he has to lead the NBA in assists and to be that guy now consistently for several seasons is amazing. And he is a guy that can still get you those points. But the construction of the team doesn't work as well when he is out there. People can't have the ball in their hands because he is pounding the rock. That is fine. He is a different type of player, and I think on a certain team, it will work, and it has worked. We've seen that. On this team, it only works for short stints, and I think that it's it. This is everything you saw that you're going to get with James Harden on this team is it. Yep. There's not some magic potion. There's not a little curtain that you can pull back and be like, oh, we've got one other thing. This is it. He is who he is. And I think he's a great player. He's top 75 all time. There's no question in my mind. He's one of the all-time players. Right. But on this team, he does not help them get to where they want to go.
Agreed. All right, let me hit you with the Phils, and we appreciate all the time you've given us, Amy. Look, as we sit here right now, they are tied for the third wild card spot. As weird a year as it's been, very up and down, slow start again. What else is new? But then they caught fire. They've been unbelievable on the road, yet there are certain guys that are really underachieving. Trey Turner, is driving you crazy. Another error yesterday, et cetera. Are we looking at a similar, like the only reason I bring up a similar sort of landing that we had last year is I think this is going to be harder because the teams around them, I think, are even better than they were last year. But how do you view the way this thing is going to, the second half, which is right upon us here for the Phils?
I think we're Mark Zumhoff's expression. We're coming in for a landing.
Let's go.
I think it's going to be similar. It would be great if they took the drama out of it. But as you mentioned, the teams are better around them. There's better teams as a whole. The Marlins are not going away right now. You hope that's a big series coming up. And these teams are the division as a whole. The Braves, we knew who they were. But everybody has really stepped up their game. The Mets have fallen off. So sad. No one cares. But everybody else is really kind of pushing the Phillies to their limit. Phillies thought they expected to probably be second to the Braves. Right. And the Marlins are like, yo, wait for us. And the rest of the Brewers are in there. Thankfully, they lost yesterday. And you look at some of the other teams around, and they're all playing up. Now, obviously, we're at the halfway point. We're at game 84 today. So it'll be interesting to see who can continue this. And if the Phillies continue their trajectory and some.
You froze. If you can hear me, Amy, we'll see if we can jump, get Amy right back up.
Sorry.
There we go. We got you.
I think it's because everybody's on the internet today. Here.
They're all calling you. You're very popular.
Yeah, they are. But yeah, so I think that you got to hope for some of those teams to fall off and the Phillies continue the slow up and down starts. The Bryce Harper power surge, comes back. Trey Turner starts to get more consistent. Nick Castellanos, what a turnaround! Like check mark there, and crazy. And Bryce Harper starts playing first base. So Kyle Schwarber, we love you for the power. The outfield.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the way I look at it too, Aim. I think that, we also have the trade deadline getting closer here. I think if you're the Phillies, as much as you always want pitching, right? And I know some people talked about Paul Goldschmidt. I get a corner outfielder so I can get Schwarber the heck out of left field. That's the move I would make.
Yeah, I mean, he's counting the days until Bryce Harper can stop being DH.
Yeah, he's as excited as we are to get him out of left field. Okay,
and listen, he's great. We love him. We love Schwarbombs. We love Schwarberfest, Hogan, all the other stuff. But he's a quintessential DH. He knows it. We know it. The fans know it. Everybody knows it. So I mean, I think that they're definitely in the playoffs. I think it just depends on how much drama they're going to give us in this one. I think unfortunately it could be a little bit similar to last year, which was fun. Like, look, you get in and you make some noise.
Could be worse. Hey, also, before we let you get out of here, I want to give you kudos for the work that you do with the American Cancer Society, for the work that you do for Coaches versus Cancer. I mean, and I know how near and dear it is to you with your brother, et cetera. But I really just kudos on just doing an amazing job of sort of jumping right in there with the coaches in the city, the college basketball coaches, and all the great work you do, because I know you lost your brother, back in 2013. I know how near and dear it is to your heart. So I just wanted to say, kudos on that.
Thank you. It's always been a cause very near and dear to me, but it's been wonderful to work with Coaches versus Cancer, the American Cancer Society here, because like everything else Philadelphia does, they really come out in droves and support that mission. I mean, $18 million to
Yeah, $18 million raised is nothing short of incredible. That's for sure. And you look at the job that Martelli and Dunphy and the crew have done. It's just been awesome. But Aim, listen, I can't thank you enough for your time. No, it's okay. I can't thank you enough for your time today. It's awesome getting to know the whole journey here, like we do here on the Rob Ellis Show. But I appreciate your time, Aim. Keep up the great work, and we'll be looking for you on NBC Sports Philadelphia. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone.
All right. That is Amy Fadool, who does an awesome job there. All right. So we touched on a couple of the things with Amy, but let me just dig in real quick on the Sixers here. Look, the way I look at this thing is I think it's a mistake to bring Harden back. I think you will get an unmotivated, which is ironic considering he's on the last year of his contract. I don't think, with him, when he doesn't want to be somewhere, he can make it a bad situation. He did it in Houston. He's done it in other spots, Brooklyn. I think he could be very similar, James Harden. This is also where I worry about Daryl Morey's affection of him, being clouded a little bit here. But look, stranger things have happened. I didn't think he was going to opt in. He opted in. He clearly saw the writing on the wall that there wasn't a lot of other options. But to me, you look at this thing, I think it's a negotiation ploy. The Sixers are up here. Other teams are here. You're going to have to figure out a way to get in the middle. I think eventually he gets moved to the Clippers before the season starts. That's my best guess. For the A2D question of the day, the agree to disagree. Are they better off without James Harden? Yeah, I think they are. I agree with that. I think they are better off without him at this point. And I know what he brings to the table. I know he led the league in assists, but I think it's time to move on from James Harden at this point. Turn it over to Tyrese Maxey. Even if you could make a deal with the Clippers and you can get Norman Powell and Terrence Mann and some draft picks, I'm good with that. They may not be as singularly talented, but I think these guys will fit well. Powell played for Nick Nurse. They know each other very well. I think that's the way to go if you're the Sixers. I think they very well could hang on to Tobias Harris and just let him walk and just take that money. That wouldn't surprise me even a little bit if that's the way it plays out. And I know Sixers fans, don't want to hear that, but I think that's the way it could go. As far as the Phillies go, and I see Thomas saying what a huge series they have coming up against Miami. Dead on. You want to chip away a little bit at that team? Absolutely. This is how you do it. You're chasing them in the wild card right now. I've given up on the division. Atlanta's going to win the division. Atlanta's just a machine. They're like a cyborg. But if you want to make some ground in the wild card, those 3 games before the All-Star break, and you want to have a good taste in your mouth during the All-Star break, go in there and take 2 out of 3. You've gotten off to a good start with the Rays so far, and Aaron Nola, to his credit, was dealing on Tuesday. So I give him a lot of credit for that. Outdealt, former Philly Zach Eflin. But it is a big series. Both of these series, the one they're in the midst of and the one that's coming up, are really, really big, I think, for them, just to sort of show where they are to themselves in a lot of ways. And you get back from the All-Star break, and all of a sudden you're right up against the trade deadline, and a lot of things could be happening by then. And, we're past the halfway mark of the season. So things, suddenly getting very real in Philly world. So, yeah, I think they are critical. As I said, I would absolutely make a move for an outfielder. I would get a corner outfielder who could play left with a little bit of pop. An Adam Duvall type is what I would do. I would get Schwarber out of the field. And that's, again, under the assumption that Harper can play first every day. If Harper tells you, guys, this isn't working, I don't feel right, etc., then, okay, that's a different story. Then you might have to pursue something else. I wouldn't be upset if they went out and got a starting pitcher at all, if that's the direction they went. You can never have enough starting pitching. And Andrew Painter with a minor little setback, I don't think you can count on him for anything this year. If you get something, it's gravy. As far as the Eagles go, we're now under 3 weeks from training camp, so we are getting close to that really fun time of year when the Eagles are underway. You got the Phillies starting to really kind of get into the home stretch here, and we're not all that far off from basketball and hockey, so it's a great time in the sporting world. But my opinion of the Eagles hasn't changed one bit. I think they go into this thing as the favorites in the NFC. I think they're the only team that I would rank ahead of them in the NFL is the Chiefs. The Chiefs beat them head to head, and the Chiefs have been on top here for the last few years, and they have Patrick Mahomes. But I think the Eagles are right there. I think they did a pretty good job keeping as many people as they could keep, which is not an easy thing to do if you're Howie Roseman. And I thought they had a really good draft. And they have a guy in Jalen Hurts who signed a massive contract for a lot of money, but I don't worry about him, from an approach and attitude standpoint one bit. In fact, I think it'll motivate him to work even harder. And your team takes its cues from its quarterback and leadership. And I think they have really good quarterback play. I think they have really good leadership with the players that they have and Nick Sirianni. So, all right, that'll do it for this week's Rob Ellis Show here on A2D Radio. I want to thank Amy Fadool for giving us a lot of her time today. I want to thank all of you for hanging out. Listen, tell a friend. Let's get the word out here. Let's blow this thing up. Let's blow up A2D Radio. Let's blow up the Rob Ellis Show. Let's keep this thing going. I appreciate all you guys in the chat section, everybody streaming, everybody listening. You guys are the best. I will see you guys next week. Have a great one. I am Rob Ellis.